1969 might have been a year of moon landings and Woodstock, but in Hollywood, it was the year the money stopped flowing. While Easy Rider was revolutionizing independent cinema, major studios were hemorrhaging cash on lavish productions that audiences simply weren't interested in seeing. The film industry was desperately trying to recapture the magic of mid-60s blockbusters like The Sound of Music. Studio executives convinced themselves that bigger budgets, longer runtimes, and more spectacle would bring audiences back to theaters. They couldn't have been more wrong. What followed was a series of disastrous miscalculations that would reshape the industry forever. Some of these costly mistakes would push legendary studios to the brink of bankruptcy. Others would derail promising careers and end Hollywood's love affair with certain genres entirely. The box office failures of 1969 represent a turning point in cinema history, the death throes of old Hollywood giving way to a new era of filmmaking. These weren't just financial disappointments. They were seismic events that forced an entire industry to reinvent itself. From forgotten oddities to infamous misfires, we're counting down the 13 worst box office disasters of 1969. Some have been virtually erased from cinematic memory, while others have achieved a strange immortality despite their commercial failures. All of them tell a story about an industry in transition and the high price of creative miscalculation. Sit back as we journey through Hollywood's year of living dangerously, when astronomical budgets met disappointing returns, and the industry learned the hard way that times were changing faster than they could adapt. The Touchables might be the most obscure entry on our list, a film so thoroughly forgotten that it's never received an official home video release. This bizarre mod film about 4 fashionable London women who kidnap a pop star and hold him hostage in an inflatable plastic dome was meant to capture the spirit of swinging London. Instead, it captured about $2.7 million in losses. The film was directed by Robert Freeman, best known as the photographer, who shot several iconic Beatles album covers. It was his first and nearly last attempt at filmmaking. Despite eye-popping visuals and a soundtrack featuring Pink Floyd, the film prioritized style so far above substance that there was barely any plot. Production troubles plagued the film from the start. The centerpiece geodesic dome set constantly malfunctioned. The dome was responsible for 28 days of the production's 34-day overrun, adding approximately $90,000 to a budget that had already ballooned to more than $6 million. When The Touchables finally limped into theaters in 1969, audiences were baffled by its paper-thin plot. Critics dismissed it as fashion shoots masquerading as a movie. Today, it exists primarily as a curiosity for dedicated cinephiles, a time capsule of late 60s style that warns what happens when fashion sense outweighs storytelling. If The Touchables attempted to capture mod London, Joanna tried to package the entire swinging London experience into one messy film. Directed by Michael Sarn, this romantic drama followed a wide-eyed 17-year-old art student discovering the pleasures and perils of London's free-spirited scene. The film was positioned as a female answer to hits like Alfie, but failed to connect with audiences. According to Fox Records, Joanna required $3.8 million in rentals to break even. By December 1970, it had made just $1.9 million, losing the studio nearly $2 million. South African actress Genevieve Waite was cast despite having little acting experience. Her high-pitched, childlike voice and mannered performance were polarizing. Donald Sutherland appeared as a dying aristocrat, but even his presence couldn't save the film from its meandering plot. Joanna was slated to compete at the 1968 Cannes Film Festival, but the festival was cancelled due to civil unrest in France. The film's release in Britain was delayed until 1969, by which point its moment had passed. The monthly film bulletin dismissed it as a tiresome tale for tiny tots. While groundbreaking in its portrayal of interracial romances, Joanna ultimately failed to make a lasting impression. Today, it exists as a curio, a film more interested in capturing a moment than telling a coherent story. James Coburn had established himself as a reliable action star by 1969, but even his considerable charisma couldn't save Hard Contract from becoming one of the year's biggest flops. This thriller about a hitman experiencing a crisis of conscience cost 20th Century Fox approximately $4 million in losses. The film paired Coburn with Lee Remick and Sterling Hayden in what should have been a compelling espionage thriller. Instead, it delivered a muddled meditation on morality that left audiences cold. The screenplay by Ellie Pogostin aimed for philosophical depth but achieved only pretentious confusion. Hard Contract suffered from terrible timing, released into a market saturated with spy thrillers. Without the glamour of James Bond or the gritty realism of other contemporary thrillers, it failed to distinguish itself. Marketing for the film was equally confused, unable to decide whether to emphasize action or existential themes. The result was promotional materials that appealed to neither action fans nor art house audiences. The film's failure contributed to Fox's growing financial crisis, forcing the studio to reevaluate its production strategy. Hard Contract faded quickly from theaters and from memory, becoming a footnote in the careers of its otherwise distinguished cast and another nail in Fox's financial coffin. When 20th Century Fox greenlit Justine, an adaptation of Lawrence Durrell's acclaimed Alexandria Quartet novels, they likely expected a sophisticated literary adaptation with international appeal. What they got was a $10 million loss and a film that even its legendary director seemed to disown. The production was troubled from the start. Originally slated to be directed by Joseph Strick, the film was taken over by George Cukor when creative differences arose. Despite Cukor's impressive pedigree, he seemed out of his depth with this exotic tale set in pre-World War II Egypt. Fox inexplicably invested $7.87 million despite a cast lacking major box office draws. Anouk Aimée, Dirk Bogarde, and Michael York were accomplished actors but hardly guaranteed ticket sales. The resulting film was a ponderous, unfocused mess that failed to capture Durrell's literary complexity. Critics savaged the film, and audiences stayed away. On its domestic release, Justine earned a paltry $1.5 million in rentals, representing one of the worst returns on investment that year. Even more baffling was Fox's decision to spend an additional $4.9 million on advertising for a clearly struggling film. Justine has virtually disappeared from film history despite being directed by one of Hollywood's most celebrated filmmakers, a cautionary tale about high literary ambition without commercial sensibility. Gregory Peck was one of Hollywood's most reliable stars, but even his considerable gravitas couldn't save the chairman, also released as the most dangerous man in the world, from becoming a costly misfire for 20th Century Fox. This Cold War thriller about an American scientist sent to China to steal an agricultural enzyme lost approximately $4.3 million. The film seemed promising, a timely espionage thriller with a prestigious star, directed by J. Lee Thompson, who had helmed classics like The Guns of Navarone. Yet something went terribly wrong. The plot, involving Peck's character being implanted with a microphone in his skull that would explode if captured, veered into ridiculous territory that even Peck couldn't ground. Critics found the film far-fetched and dull despite its exotic setting. Audiences, weary of formulaic Cold War thrillers, stayed away. The marketing, emphasizing the outlandish elements, likely did more harm than good. The chairman represented another miscalculation by Fox in a year full of them. The studio was betting on established formulas at a time when audience tastes were evolving. Younger viewers, drawn to counterculture films like Easy Rider, had little interest in Cold War intrigue, no matter how many explosive implants were involved. Western films were still big business in 1969, but 100 Rifles proved that not every horse opera could strike box office gold. This action-packed frontier tale starring Jim Brown, Raquel Welch, and Burt Reynolds lost 20th Century Fox approximately $420,000, a smaller amount than other entries, but still a significant disappointment. Set during the Mexican Revolution, 100 Rifles told the story of an unlikely alliance between a lawman, Brown, a revolutionary, Reynolds, and a fierce indigenous woman, Welch. The film featured one of Hollywood's first interracial love scenes between Brown and Welch, controversial enough that South Africa banned the film entirely. Despite impressive location shooting in Spain and a compelling premise, the film suffered from an uneven tone and uninspired direction. Critics were lukewarm, noting that it wasted its talented cast on a predictable plot. The marketing focused heavily on Welch's sex appeal, with provocative posters promising more skin than the film delivered. This created false expectations that led to disappointed audiences. While $420,000 might not seem catastrophic in isolation, when combined with Fox's other failures that year, it represented another sign of old Hollywood's declining business model. Today, 100 Rifles is occasionally revived as a curiosity for its groundbreaking interracial romance, but otherwise remains a footnote. By 1969, Michael Caine had established himself as one of Britain's most bankable stars, following successes like Alfie and The Ipcress File. Deadfall, however, represented a significant misstep that cost 20th Century Fox approximately $2.8 million. This convoluted thriller, directed by Brian Forbes, cast Caine as a jewel thief engaged in an elaborate heist while becoming entangled with a criminal couple. The film tried to be both a sophisticated crime thriller and a psychological drama about an Oedipal relationship, succeeding at neither. Critics were unimpressed with the glacial pacing and confusing plot, though many praised John Barry's guitar-heavy score. Audiences, expecting another exciting Caine caper in the vein of The Italian Job, were baffled by the film's pretentious artiness and downbeat tone. Deadfall was particularly disappointing for Fox because it was part of a two-picture deal with Caine, who was then considered a hot property. The first film in the deal, The Magus, had already proven to be a financial disaster, and Deadfall confirmed that the studio had significantly overpaid. The film's failure represented another miscalculation in a disastrous year for Fox. The studio was desperately searching for winning formulas in a changing marketplace, banking on star power that was proving increasingly unreliable as a draw. Few films in 1969 had a more promising premise than Che, a biopic of revolutionary leader Che Guevara starring Omar Sharif in the title role and Jack Palance as Fidel Castro. Yet this 20th Century Fox production became one of the year's most notorious flops, losing approximately $5.3 million. Released just 2 years after Guevara's death, the film attempted to capitalize on his growing counterculture icon status. Instead, it delivered a simplistic, historically questionable account that satisfied neither Guevara's admirers nor his critics. Director Richard Fleischer seemed completely lost with this material. Critics were merciless. Roger Ebert described it as a film that inspires excruciating boredom, accompanied by nausea. Sharif appeared uncomfortable throughout, while Palance's performance as Castro bordered on caricature. The screenplay reduced complex historical events to trite Hollywood cliches. Even before its release, Che sparked controversy. A theater in New York was bombed, and conservative groups organized boycotts. Yet, these controversies failed to generate positive interest. The film opened without press screenings and grossed a mere $76,000 in its first week. Che has the dubious distinction of appearing in the 50 worst films of all time, cemented as one of Hollywood's most notorious misfires and another catastrophic misjudgment by Fox. When 20th Century Fox cast Richard Burton and Rex Harrison as an aging gay couple running a hair salon in Staircase, they likely expected the star power of these acting legends to overcome any audience discomfort with the subject matter. Instead, they found themselves with another massive flop that lost approximately $8.5 million. Based on a successful play by Charles Dyer, Staircase should have been a prestige production. It was directed by Stanley Donen, known for classics like Singin' in the Rain, and featured two respected actors. Yet the film turned what had been a sensitive stage portrayal into an uncomfortable comedy that didn't know whether to laugh at or with its protagonists. Both Burton and Harrison seemed visibly uncomfortable, giving mannered performances that veered into stereotype. Critics noted that neither actor seemed committed to their roles, particularly damaging for a film requiring nuanced characterizations. The marketing campaign was equally confused, unsure whether to present Staircase as a serious drama or a camp comedy. This uncertainty translated into poor box office results, earning a mere $1.85 million in rentals against its $6.37 million budget. Staircase has gained recognition as an early, if problematic, Hollywood portrayal of a gay relationship. However, its commercial failure reinforced the industry's reluctance to tackle LGBTQ+ themes for years to come. On paper, Mackenna's Gold seemed like a surefire hit, a big-budget Western adventure starring Gregory, Peck, and Omar Sharif, directed by J. Lee Thompson, with a supporting cast that included Julie Newmar and Telly Savalas. Instead, it became another costly misfire in Columbia Pictures' ledger, failing to recoup its considerable production costs. The film centered on a sheriff, Peck, forced by bandits to lead them to a canyon filled with gold. Despite spectacular location shooting in Canyon de Chelly, the film suffered from a derivative plot and uninspired direction. The studio's decision to cut Thompson's original 3-hour vision down to 128 minutes resulted in a choppy narrative. Mackenna's Gold was one of the last gasps of the traditional Hollywood Western on an epic scale. It arrived as the genre was being revolutionized by revisionist westerns like The Wild Bunch, making its conventional storytelling feel dated. Critics were largely dismissive, with Roger Ebert calling it a weird compendium of violence, special effects, and color photography. Despite an extensive marketing campaign, audiences remained indifferent, and the film failed to recoup its costs despite decent international business. Mackenna's Gold has developed a small cult following for its impressive landscape photography, but remains primarily remembered as an example of Hollywood's fading Western formula failing to connect with changing audiences. The Battle of Britain was one of the most ambitious war films ever made, featuring a massive international cast including Michael Caine, Laurence Olivier, and Christopher Plummer. This meticulously researched recreation of the 1940 air campaign was a hit in the United Kingdom, but bombed in America, losing approximately $10 million. Producer Harry Saltzman spared no expense in capturing the aerial dogfights. The film boasted an unprecedented collection of period aircraft and spectacular aerial photography. Yet, American audiences, increasingly disillusioned with war films during Vietnam, stayed away. Part of the problem was the film's resolute Britishness. Unlike previous World War II films that catered to American audiences by featuring American characters, the Battle of Britain focused almost exclusively on British and German perspectives. While historically accurate, it limited appeal in the crucial American market. United Artists had expected the Battle of Britain to be a major earner for 1969. Its failure contributed to a growing financial crisis at the studio, which would culminate years later with the catastrophic Heaven's Gate. Over time, the film has been reassessed and is now considered one of the most authentic war films of its era. Its spectacular aerial sequences remain impressive even by today's standards. However, its initial failure serves as a reminder that even well-made films can fall victim to shifting audience tastes. Few box office disasters of 1969 are as notorious as Paint Your Wagon, a bloated Western musical that paired the unlikely trio of Lee Marvin, Clint Eastwood, and Gene Seberg, none of whom could sing. This Paramount production, based on a 1951 Broadway musical, was a spectacular miscalculation that failed to recoup its enormous budget. The film tells the story of two gold prospectors who share a wife in a mining town, a premise that might have worked as a straight Western but felt awkward as a musical. Director Joshua Logan seemed unable to control the production's spiraling costs or runtime. Originally budgeted at $10 million, Paint Your Wagon's final cost was closer to $20 million, a staggering sum for 1969. The production was plagued by location problems in Oregon, where rain frequently delayed shooting, and by Marvin's legendary drinking. Critics were unimpressed, particularly with the singing. Marvin growled his way through songs, while Eastwood delivered what one reviewer called flat tones. Audiences rejected the ponderous 166-minute runtime and dated sensibility. Despite these problems, Paint Your Wagon performed better than expected, though nowhere near well enough to recoup its costs. Over time, it has developed a cult following for its sheer oddity, the spectacle of tough guy actors awkwardly belting show tunes. Our list concludes with perhaps the most notorious box office disappointment of 1969, Hello, Dolly, a lavish musical starring Barbra Streisand that nearly bankrupted 20th Century Fox despite 7 Academy Award nominations. With a budget of $25 million, approximately $190 million today, Hello, Dolly was one of the most expensive films ever made at that time. The production featured elaborate sets, thousands of costumes, and spectacular musical numbers choreographed by Michael Kidd. Director Gene Kelly seemed determined to create the ultimate big screen spectacle. The problems began with casting. Streisand, though talented, was just 27, far too young for middle-aged matchmaker Dolly Levi. Her co-star Walter Matthau openly feuded with her during production, creating tension on set. Additionally, the film's release was significantly delayed due to contractual obligations. The original Broadway production was still running, and the agreement specified that the movie couldn't be released until June 1971 unless the stage show closed earlier. Fox paid an estimated $1 to $2 million to negotiate an early release. When Hello, Dolly finally premiered in December 1969, traditional musicals were rapidly falling out of favor. Despite earning $33.2 million, the film's enormous budget meant it still represented a significant loss for Fox. Today, its status as one of Hollywood's costliest miscalculations remains secure, a glittering dinosaur that signaled the end of an era. The box office disasters of 1969 weren't just isolated failures, they represented a seismic shift in Hollywood. Collectively, these flops signaled the death knell for old Hollywood's business model and forced major studios to fundamentally rethink their approach to filmmaking. The impact was immediate and severe. 20th Century Fox, which had suffered the most with bombs like Hello, Dolly, Justine, and Che, found itself on the brink of bankruptcy. The studio was only saved by the unexpected success of Patton and MASH in 1970, films that represented a new, more cynical sensibility. What these failures made clear was that audience tastes had changed dramatically. The success of low-budget, youth-oriented films like Easy Rider, which cost just $400,000 to make but grossed $60 million, demonstrated that authenticity and cultural relevance had become more important than star power or production values. The era of the big-budget musical, which had thrived since The Sound of Music in 1965, came to an abrupt end. Studios that had been rushing to produce expensive musical extravaganzas suddenly slammed on the brakes. It would be decades before Hollywood would risk big budgets on musicals again. These failures accelerated the transition to New Hollywood, an era where directors gained unprecedented creative control and films embraced more adult themes, complex characters, and ambiguous endings. Ironically, many of the films on our list have found new life. The Battle of Britain is now considered a classic war film, while oddities like Paint Your Wagon have cultivated dedicated cult followings. Even failures like Staircase have gained historical importance for their early, if flawed, attempts at LGBTQ+ representation. The box office disasters of 1969 may have been financial catastrophes, but they paved the way for one of the most creatively fertile periods in American cinema history.